on Goblin Reddit. Today's story is...
My biological parents abandoned me at birth, but 20 years later, my photo appeared in a newspaper, and I received a letter that would change 3 lives forever. My biological parents met during their university years. My mother became pregnant with me unexpectedly. Neither of them were prepared for parenthood and didn't know how to handle the situation. They consulted with their families and made the decision to give me up for adoption. That's how I ended up in the foster care system. Living in temporary homes was extremely difficult. I didn't have a real family, no one to turn to or lean on, and I constantly felt alone. It wasn't just the absence of family that made the experience so hard, but also the bullying I suffered. I was constantly intimidated by older children who seemed to attack me for being shy and different. I wasn't the kind of kid who could easily defend himself, and my introverted nature made me a perfect target. They made fun of me for being studious, for not fitting in, for being too quiet. For many years, I was completely unaware of my origins, who my biological parents were, or what my history was. I knew nothing about them or why they decided to give me up for adoption. That part of my life seemed like a mystery that no one talked about. Eventually, I was adopted by a family, and at first it seemed like everything would finally get better. I was excited, hopeful, and thought that this new family would be my chance to start over, but I quickly realized that this new life wasn't as good as I had imagined. The family that adopted me seemed more interested in the money they received for taking care of me than in really caring about me. They treated me as if I were just another responsibility to take care of. They made me sleep in a small, crowded room with several other children who had also been adopted. We were all crammed into the same space with no possibility of privacy, and it felt claustrophobic. It was hard to feel like part of the family when they treated me like that. The only thing that kept me going was school. It was the only place where I could concentrate on my studies and try to build a future for myself, even though everything else in my life was so complicated. At least at school, I had the opportunity to escape for a moment and dream of something better. When I was in secondary school, something incredible happened that I will never forget. I won the school spelling bee, and it felt like one of the greatest achievements of my life up until that point. I was extremely proud of myself, and I still remember that feeling of joy and fulfillment. To make it even more special, my name, picture, and the name of my school were published in the local newspaper. It was the kind of recognition that made me feel like I was finally getting the attention and appreciation I deserved. Little did I know that this moment would become a turning point in my life in a way that I would never have expected. It turns out that the newspaper article was how my birth mother found out about me. I never knew it, but after giving me up for adoption, she had always been curious about me. She had tried to find me before, but for years she had been unsuccessful. However, after seeing the newspaper and recognizing my name, she finally had the clue she had been waiting for. It was like a twist of fate that allowed her to contact me. She took the first step by contacting my school, somehow getting my address through their records, and sent me a letter. To this day, I'm not sure how or why my school gave her that information, but they did, and that's how she was able to contact me. The letter she sent was completely unexpected and overwhelming. She introduced herself as my biological mother and asked me to contact her. I had to read the letter 3 times. The words on that piece of paper seemed unreal, and I was totally shocked. I had never imagined that the woman who gave me up for adoption would finally contact me by letter, of all things. But what really blew me away were the photographs she included with the letter. They were pictures of her and my biological father. They both looked so happy and in love. In those photos, they seemed to have it all figured out, and I could almost feel their joy radiating through the images. Looking at them, I could see something of myself in my mother's smile and features. It was a strange feeling to recognize that connection and realize how much I looked like her. My heart ached as I looked at the photos and finally got a glimpse of who my mother was, someone I had only been able to wonder about all my life. After reflecting for a few days, I decided to write back to my birth mother. I had so many questions, especially after the surprise of receiving her letter. I wanted to understand why she gave me up for adoption all those years ago. In her reply, she explained that she was young and naive and not ready to take care of me. She wrote about how she had made that decision because she felt unprepared for the responsibility of motherhood, and that she regretted what she did. I also asked her why she was contacting me after so long. Why now? After so many years of silence. In her next letter, she told me that she had always thought about me and had been curious about how I was doing and where I lived. She said she had never forgotten me and had wondered how my life had turned out. Her words seemed sincere, but there was something at the back of my mind that made me feel uneasy. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate her reaching out, but I still had doubts about her. After weeks of exchanging letters, things took another unexpected turn. My birth mother asked if she and my birth father could meet me in person. I was surprised. Why would they want to meet me after all these years? What would we even talk about? I wasn't sure I was ready for that kind of encounter. Part of me wanted to refuse, because it felt overwhelming. But she insisted that it would only be a meeting, and that it wouldn't hurt to meet and talk. After much hesitation, I nervously agreed, thinking that maybe it would help me understand more about my past and my biological parents. Looking back, I really wish I hadn't agreed to meet them. The day I met my biological parents turned out to be one of the most uncomfortable and unpleasant experiences of my life. From the moment I arrived, everything felt wrong. Neither of them seemed comfortable around me. They didn't even greet me properly. No hugs, no handshakes, nothing to make me feel like I was really part of their lives. My biological father barely looked at me and didn't say a word the whole time. It was as if he were physically present but emotionally absent. My mother, on the other hand, seemed nervous and kept talking about random things in her life, as if trying to fill the silence with something, anything. At one point during the conversation, she casually mentioned that they were trying to have another child now that they were married. My mind couldn't process what he was saying. Trying to get pregnant? You mean have a child? Hello, I am your son, I thought. Here they were, talking about starting a family by having another child while I was sitting there, trying to understand my own place in their lives. My heart was pounding and my breathing almost stopped. I couldn't sit there in silence any longer. I had to ask them, so I gathered up all the courage I could and blurted out, "Are you ever going to adopt me? Don't you want me back?" I needed answers. At this, my birth parents were frozen. My father, who had barely said a word up to that point, glanced sideways at my mother, and I could see him snort, almost as if he were annoyed by the question. My mother, however, tried to explain herself awkwardly. She said they just wanted to meet me to see that I was well. She admitted that they had always felt somewhat guilty about abandoning me, but when I asked about the adoption, she was silent for a moment, before explaining that it was not possible for them to adopt me. She said there was no way they could bring me back into their lives without everyone finding out that she had become pregnant with me when she was so young. She had kept the whole thing secret from almost everyone, even my biological father's family. She didn't want anyone to know the truth, and my resemblance to her was clear proof. Then my birth mother said something that made my stomach drop. She told me that she and my father had decided to start over with new children. The meeting, she said, was so that I could get closure, so that I wouldn't have questions about them in the future. When I heard that, it was as if everything inside me just collapsed. I felt my chest tighten, and tears began to well up in my eyes. It was clear now. Nothing I had hoped for was going to happen. They didn't want me. They never wanted me. The truth was that they were more interested in having a fresh start with new children, while I was just a part of their past they didn't want to deal with. I couldn't look her in the eye. It hurt too much. I was just a reminder to them of something they wanted to forget. I wasn't wanted. I wasn't important to them. I felt like nothing. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. They were fine having new children, but they couldn't even consider bringing me back into their lives. It was just a mistake they wanted to erase. A part of their story they wished had never happened. In that moment, I felt more abandoned than ever before. I was a little angry with them, so I told them directly that it was cruel of them to want to get in touch with me after all this time, just to justify never getting back to me. I mean, my life is difficult, but I was trying to be okay on my own. However, now they had broken me down even more. I didn't want to talk to them anymore. I didn't want them to play with my emotions, to give me hope, and then disappoint me again. I looked directly at my birth mother and told her that she could continue to live her life as she wished. But it was not my job to make her feel better or lessen her guilt. I had already been through so much in foster care. I didn't want them to make it harder for me by trying to keep in touch. I made it clear that I would rather never know than know them and continue to be rejected. I could see my biological father's face turning red with embarrassment, and my mother seemed on the verge of tears. But honestly, at that moment I didn't feel bad for them. I just couldn't take it anymore. Without saying another word, I got up and left them there. I didn't care how they felt. All that mattered was that I needed to protect myself from the pain. After that day, I cut off all communication with my mother and hoped she would just disappear. I wanted nothing to do with her, with them. The whole experience left me devastated, and I cried for days. It was a painful reminder that the family I had always longed for was something I might never have. It took a lot of therapy for me to even begin to accept that reality, to understand that I might never have the kind of family I had dreamed of. It was a long and difficult process, but over the years I have learned to accept that part of my life. Fortunately, I now have a wonderful partner who really understands my upbringing. He loves me for who I am, and that is something I never thought I would experience. I have never felt the need to contact my biological parents again. Nor have I wondered about them all these years. I have come to realize that family is not just about blood. It's about the people who are there for you, who love you unconditionally. And for me, my partner and my friends are the ones who are here now, not the ones who abandoned me. I recently received an email from someone called Kylie, who claimed to be my sister. In the email, she explained how she had recently discovered that I existed. Apparently, she had been looking through some old pregnancy photos of my birth mother and found one of me when she gave birth to me in the hospital before abandoning me. It was then that Kylie and her brother confronted my birth parents and managed to get the truth about me. My sister wrote that she then searched for me on LinkedIn and was able to get in touch with me. She said that she had always wanted a sister and would love to meet me, adding that I could take my time to think about it. Reading that email, I was completely stunned. I felt like a child again, having spent sleepless nights after meeting my biological parents that one time. I had worked so hard to move on and get away from them, but now with this email, I felt like I was being dragged back into a situation I didn't want to be part of. I was still recovering from her email when, 2 days later, my birth mother also got in touch. Apparently, she had obtained my email address through her daughter, and in her message, she invited me to dinner at their house. She said that her adult children had lots of questions for me, and that she really wanted me to come and meet them all. He even wrote that my biological father would behave better this time, as if he were acknowledging the awkwardness of our last encounter, when he had barely spoken to me and refused to interact. At this point, I was starting to get angry. Why were they suddenly so interested in me after all these years? What was even left to ask? They had abandoned me. Did they want me to sit with them and share my sad story? Did they want to hear how I grew up in foster care, how I was bullied, and how I faced all kinds of trauma as a minor? Did they want to listen, or did they just want to feel sorry for me to look good in front of their new family? It seemed like they were just trying to act concerned, as if they wanted to prove something to themselves or to their children, when I'm sure they don't really care. Their sudden interest in me feels like a lie, and I'm not sure I want to be part of it. At this point, I turned to Reddit just to be sure. Stay AH, I'm the asshole. Should I decline their dinner invitation or should I give them a second chance? Update 1. Thank you all for your kind words and for sharing your thoughts with me. It has been helpful to hear everyone's perspectives, although I can see that there are many mixed feelings about what I should do next. Some are advising me to block my birth family and move on with my life, saying it's best to cut ties and not look back. On the other hand, some seem to think that maybe there's a deeper reason behind why they're contacting me now, as if there's something I don't yet understand. To be honest, I'm starting to wonder about it too. Just last night, my birth mother sent me another email. She asked if I was going to accept her invitation to dinner next weekend, and even asked what my favorite food was so she could make it for me. At first, I didn't know what to think. It felt a little unsettling, to be honest. She's asking me such thoughtful questions, but it feels weird because she's been a complete stranger to me all my life. I've never had a relationship with her, and now, out of the blue, she's acting like she cares about all these little details. What I like to eat, when I can come, etc. It's confusing because part of me wants to believe that maybe, after all these years, she is genuinely trying to make up for lost time, to build a connection. But another part of me can't help but wonder if it's all a bit too late. Why now? Why is she asking about my favorite food after all this time of silence? I have a feeling about this. There is something almost uncomfortable about the sudden change in his behavior. I am still torn between wanting to give my birth family a chance and feeling cautious, unsure of what his true intentions might be. It's a difficult situation. I really need some time to think about it. Update 2. It's been a while since my last update. After much back and forth and, honestly, a lot of internal struggle, I finally decided to meet with my birth parents and their children, Kylie and Matt. I felt like I had to do it, just to see if there was any truth to the idea that they wanted to rebuild some kind of connection. Maybe I could finally understand what they were really looking for, and in some strange way, I thought it might help me find closure. The meeting was a disaster from start to finish. From the moment I walked into their house, my birth parents acted overly friendly, almost as if they were trying too hard to show how concerned they were. It was obvious that they wanted to appear as the perfect parents in front of their adult children, almost as if they were trying to erase the past and prove that they weren't the villains who had abandoned me. Their behavior felt so rehearsed, so calculated, as if they were putting on a show for their children, trying to get a free pass from them. I could tell that they didn't want to be seen as bad parents, especially not in front of their children. This time, even my biological father asked me a lot of questions about my life, and he seemed overly enthusiastic about meeting me. As Kylie and her brother were asking me lots of questions about my life and the foster homes, I decided to be completely open and honest with them, just as they wanted it to be, and to share the painful truth about how terrible my childhood had been. I told them about the abuse, the bullying, the isolation. I opened up about all the things I had faced, all the things I'd endured growing up, without a family, without anyone to care. It was difficult to open up, but I felt that if I was ever going to have any kind of conversation with them, it had to be real. While Kylie and her brother looked at me with surprise and concern, my biological parents, instead of showing empathy, immediately tried to minimize everything I said. They dismissed it almost as if it wasn't as bad as I was making it sound. They said things like it probably wasn't that bad, and suggested that maybe I was just trying to gain sympathy by exaggerating my experiences. That hurt deeply. I was baring my soul, sharing some of the darkest moments of my life, and they dismissed it as nothing. I felt like they were minimizing everything that had happened just to feel better about themselves. Fortunately, Kylie and Matt understood what I had been through. They had more sympathy for me than my biological parents. They seemed angry that their parents had even tried to interrupt me and play down my feelings. I could see the guilt in their eyes, the shock that my birth parents had hidden all this from them. I'm sure they also felt bad that, while they had both had a great life with my birth parents, I had been abandoned to fend for myself all this time. Not that I was trying to make them feel bad for me, but hearing the truth seemed to hit them hard. Kylie had tears in her eyes as she hugged me, and she and her brother turned to their parents and asked them how they could be so cruel as to abandon their own child. Her brother also kept telling me how he would have loved to have 2 older sisters growing up instead of just 1, and it broke my heart a little to hear that. This was the first time that anyone had really shown any emotion about what had happened to me, and it made me feel truly seen. But in the end, despite everything, my biological parents still turned the tables on me. They started accusing me of making up stories to try to turn their children against me. My biological father called me jealous and hateful. His words felt like a slap in the face. After everything I had said, after all the pain I had shared, now they were acting as if I were the problem. My birth mother also kept saying that, although she still felt guilty about giving me up for adoption, I should at least talk about the good things in my life, instead of focusing only on the bad. It was as if they were trying to distance themselves from the truth by labeling me as angry and resentful, as if my emotions were some kind of attack against them. My birth parents simply couldn't see that all I wanted was acknowledgement, maybe even an apology for what they had done, but instead they were blaming me for how they had made me feel. They didn't care at all about understanding my pain. All they cared about was protecting themselves and avoiding the guilt of their past decisions. They couldn't take any responsibility for the damage they had caused, and instead were trying to change the narrative to make me look like the villain. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the frustration burning, and finally I exploded. "You know what? This is enough," I said, my voice trembling with anger. I shared my truth with you. I told you what you put me through, how your actions affected me for years, and yet all you've done is try to twist it and make me out to be the bad guy. You don't want to hear the truth, do you? You never wanted to face what you did to me, and now you're acting like I'm the one who's broken. Well, I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done with you. Don't contact me again. I don't need you, and I don't want you in my life. I've been better off without you two, and I intend to stay that way. As the words came out of my mouth, I could see the shock on their faces. Kylie and her brother also seemed angry with their parents. They asked me to stay a little longer, but I didn't want to anymore. I left that meeting feeling more confused and hurt than ever. I felt like I had been dragged back into my birth parents' world, only to be dismissed and blamed, all while they were trying to act like the good guys in front of their new family. The whole situation was a complete disaster. Update 3. A few weeks had passed since that painful meeting with my birth parents, and I honestly thought it was all over. I had said what I had to say, I had walked away and moved on, or at least I had been trying to. But just when I thought everything had calmed down, I received messages from Kylie and Matt. After everything that had happened, I didn't expect to hear from them again, especially given how complicated everything had become. But when I opened their messages, I could feel the weight of what they were saying. They both apologized on behalf of their parents. Kylie and Matt admitted that they had been horrified when they heard what I had been through in foster care and how their parents had downplayed it. They had written how ashamed they were of their parents. They never expected to see such cruelty and rejection. They wrote that after I left, my biological parents continued to refuse to acknowledge the depth of the pain they had caused. They tried to minimize everything as if I was the one who was wrong for telling them something. At one point, my biological father even said he felt no remorse for abandoning me. Kylie and her brother said that hearing the truth from me and seeing their parents' reactions had changed something inside them. They could no longer look at their parents in the same way. Now they saw them in a new light, one that made them question everything they had ever believed about their family. Kylie and her brother have both offered to meet with me or help in any way they can. They want to be there for me, to make up for what their parents have done to me. I think they both feel much more guilt than my biological parents ever have. Honestly, I never wanted anything from them. All I wanted was acknowledgement, and that's it. I didn't want them to feel like they needed to make things right for me or that they could somehow make up for the damage their parents had caused. I appreciated their support, but I knew I had to make it clear where I stood. So I told them the truth. I explained that I didn't want to have a relationship with them. They had contacted me wanting to know more about me, and I had granted them that wish, but that was it. I also wrote that while my time in foster care had been hell, a relentless nightmare that I had lived through and survived, it was behind me now. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece with my own hands. I told them that although I understood their anger towards their parents, I didn't want to jeopardize the relationships they had with them. They had their own lives to live. I didn't want to be the one to cause a rift between them and their parents. I'm fine now, I wrote. I've got through the worst. I don't need anything from either of you, and I don't want to cause any more conflict in your family. You can get on with your lives with your parents, and I'll get on with mine. All the best to you and your family. Kylie and her brother sent me a few more replies, urging me to at least have a relationship with them, and I could see that they were struggling to accept what I had said, but I made it clear that my decision was not about rejecting them. It was about protecting the peace they had with their parents. I didn't want to be the source of more pain, either for them or for myself. My biological parents would never accept me or acknowledge my pain, so I wasn't going to let the past continue to torment me and drag me down. All I wanted was to heal and protect my peace. I was stronger for having gone through everything I had been through, and I didn't need anyone to fix that. I was no longer angry, and I wasn't looking for apologies or resolutions that would never come. The conversation with Kylie and her brother ended with a sense of finality. I could tell they were disappointed, but they understood and didn't argue anymore.